Travis Kelce sat in his Kansas City home on a quiet Tuesday evening, surrounded by the familiar ritual of opening fan mail that his assistant had sorted into neat stacks on his dining room table. The routine had become almost meditative over the years, children asking for autographs, adults sharing stories about how football had brought their families together, occasional marriage proposals, and the standard requests for appearances at birthday parties or school events. Most letters received a signed photo and a form response, but Travis still insisted on reading every single one personally. He was halfway through the evening's pile when one envelope stopped him cold. Unlike the others, this one was addressed in shaky, childlike handwriting that immediately caught his attention. The paper was slightly wrinkled, as if it had been folded and unfolded many times before being sent. Something about the careful way his name was written in pencil, with each letter formed slowly and deliberately, made him pause. Inside, he found a single sheet of notebook paper with wide ruled lines, the kind used in elementary school. The letter was written in the same hesitant, childish handwriting as the envelope, with some words spelled incorrectly and others crossed out and rewritten. But it was the content that made Travis's breath catch in his throat. "Dear Mr. Kelce," it began, "my name is Luke Brennigan, and I am your biggest fan in the whole world. I watch every single one of your games, even when I'm in the hospital getting my treatment. You make the best catches, and you always smile after touchdowns, which makes me happy too." Travis found himself smiling as he read, imagining the young fan who had taken such care to write to him. But as he continued reading, the tone of the letter shifted in a way that made his stomach tighten with growing concern. "I am really sick with cancer, and the doctors say I don't have very much time left. I know you probably get lots of letters from kids, but I wanted you to know that watching you play makes me forget about being scared. Wouldn't it be incredible if we could meet each other someday, even just for a few minutes? I have so many questions about football and about being brave when things are really hard." Travis set the letter down for a moment, feeling a familiar ache in his chest that came whenever he encountered childhood illness. He had visited enough children's hospitals to understand the weight behind those carefully chosen words. This wasn't just fan mail. This was a child reaching out from what might be his final day. He picked up the letter again, noticing that a small photograph had been tucked behind the paper. The image showed a thin boy who couldn't have been more than 10 years old, completely bald from chemotherapy treatment, but wearing the biggest, most genuine smile Travis had ever seen. The child was wearing a Kansas City Chiefs jersey with Travis's number, and he was giving a thumbs up to the camera, despite the medical equipment visible in the background. "That's me at the hospital," the letter continued in the next paragraph. "I always wear your jersey when I have to get treatment because it makes me feel strong like you. The nurses say I'm very brave, but I don't feel brave most of the time. I feel scared and sad and tired. But when I watch you play football, I remember that heroes are real, and that makes everything better." Travis felt tears beginning to form in his eyes as he read the final paragraph of Luke's letter. The handwriting became even shakier toward the end, as if the effort of writing had become increasingly difficult. "I know you're probably too busy to visit me, but that's okay. Just knowing that you read my letter would make me the happiest kid in the world. Thank you for being my hero, and for showing me that you can be tough and kind at the same time. I hope someday I can be like you. Your biggest fan forever, Luke Brennigan." But there was a postscript at the bottom of the page that made Travis's hands begin to shake as he read it. "P.S. If you're reading this, it probably means I'm not here anymore. Mom promised she would send this letter even if something happened to me. I wanted you to know that you made me happy even when I was really scared and sad. I hope that someday you can do that for other kids too, because that's what real heroes do." Travis stared at the letter in disbelief, reading the postscript again to make sure he had understood correctly. His heart was pounding as he looked for any additional information, any indication of when this letter might have been written or what Luke's current condition might be. That's when he noticed a second piece of paper folded behind Luke's letter. This one was written in adult handwriting, in blue ink that looked fresh compared to Luke's pencil mark. "Dear Mr. Kelce," it read, "my name is Evangeline Brennigan, and I am Luke's mother. I am writing this note to accompany my son's letter, which he wrote to you 3 days before he passed away. Luke died yesterday morning at Children's Mercy Hospital, surrounded by his family. Even in his final days, he talked constantly about you and about how much he hoped you would read his letter. Travis felt the room spinning around him as he continued reading Evangeline's note. Luke made me promise that I would send his letter to you no matter what happened. He said it was important that you know how much you meant to him and that you understand the responsibility that comes with being someone's hero. I hope this letter finds you well, and I hope you understand that you gave my son joy during the darkest period of his life. At the bottom of Evangeline's note was a final line that would haunt Travis for months to come. Luke believed that heroes never give up on people who need them. I pray that his faith in you was justified. Travis dropped both letters onto the table, his hands shaking as the full weight of what he had just read settled over him. Somewhere in Kansas City, a family was grieving the loss of a 10-year-old boy who had spent his final days thinking about a football player he had never met. A child had died, believing that Travis Kelce was his hero. And now that child's final wish was sitting on his dining room table, asking him to be a hero for other children too. His phone began ringing insistently from the kitchen counter, but Travis couldn't move to answer. He stared at Luke's photograph, at that incredible smile that had somehow persisted through months of cancer treatment, and realized that everything in his life was about to change. He had no idea that at that very moment, Evangeline Brannigan was posting Luke's letter on social media, sharing her son's final words with the world. He had no idea that within hours, Luke's story would be trending on every platform, that news outlets would be calling for interviews, that millions of people would be watching to see how Travis Kelce would respond to a dead child's final request. All Travis knew was that a 10-year-old boy had believed in him completely, and now he had to figure out how to be worthy of that faith. The phone calls started before Travis had even finished reading Luke's letter for the 3rd time. His agent, his publicist, his family members, everyone seemed to be calling at once with news that Luke's story was spreading across social media faster than anyone could have anticipated. Evangeline's post, which included a photo of Luke's handwritten letter alongside the picture of him in Travis's jersey, had been shared thousands of times within the first hour. Travis finally answered his phone when he saw his mother's number on the screen. "Travis, honey, have you seen what's happening online?" Donna Kelce's voice was thick with emotion. "There's this story about a little boy who wrote you a letter before he died, and people are sharing it everywhere. The poor family, Travis. That poor little baby." "I just read the letter, Mom," Travis said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He died yesterday. This kid spent his last days writing to, and I never even knew he existed." The guilt hit him like a physical blow. How many letters like Luke's had he missed over the years? How many children had reached out to him while fighting for their lives, hoping for just a moment of connection with their hero? The thought that Luke might have died waiting for a response that never came was almost unbearable. Within an hour of Evangeline's post going viral, Travis's phone was ringing with interview requests from every major news outlet in the country. The story had all the elements that made for compelling media coverage: a dying child, a professional athlete, and a heartbreaking final message that touched on themes of heroism, loss, and hope. But Travis wasn't thinking about media coverage as he sat in his living room, still holding Luke's letter. He was thinking about a 10-year-old boy who had faced cancer with more courage than most adults could manage, who had found strength in watching football games, and who had somehow maintained enough hope to write a letter asking to meet his hero. "I have to do something," Travis said to his agent when he finally returned the call. "This isn't about publicity or image management. This kid believed in me, and he asked me to help other children. I can't just ignore that." "Of course you can't," his agent agreed. "But we need to be careful about how we approach. The family is grieving, and the whole world is watching. Whatever you do has to be genuine and respectful." Travis knew his agent was right, but he also knew that his first instinct had nothing to do with public relations strategy. He wanted to call Evangeline Brannigan immediately to tell her how sorry he was for her loss, to ask her about Luke, and learn more about the remarkable child who had touched his heart so deep. He found the Brannigan family's contact information through the return address on Luke's envelope and called Evangeline that evening. The conversation that followed would change both of their lives forever. Mrs. Brannigan, this is Travis Kelce, he said, when she answered the phone. The silence that followed was so complete that Travis wondered if the call had been disconnected. "Oh my God," Evangeline finally whispered. "You actually called? Luke always said you would, but I never believed. I hoped, but—" Her voice broke as she began to cry. "I'm so sorry for your loss," Travis said, struggling to find adequate words. "I just read Luke's letter, and I want you to know that it's one of the most incredible things anyone has ever written to me. He sounds like he was an amazing kid." "He was," Evangeline said through her tears. "He was the strongest, bravest, most loving child you could ever imagine. Even when he was in pain, even when the treatments made him so sick he could barely lift his head, he would still watch your game. He said you taught him that being tough didn't mean you couldn't be kind." Travis felt his throat tighten as he listened to Evangeline talk about her son. "Tell me about him," he said. "I want to know everything. What did he like besides football? What made him laugh?" For the next hour, Evangeline shared stories about Luke's life. She told Travis about how Luke had insisted on wearing his Chiefs jersey to every medical appointment, how he had memorized statistics from every game Travis had ever played, how he had drawn pictures of touchdown celebration while sitting in chemotherapy infusion chair. "He never complained," Evangeline said. "Not once in 18 months of treatment. When other kids in the oncology ward were crying or angry, Luke would try to cheer them up. He would show them videos of your games on his tablet and explain the plays. The nurses called him their little coach." "What can I do for your family?" Travis asked. "I know nothing can bring Luke back, but please let me help in some way." Evangeline was quiet for a long moment before responding. "Luke's funeral is this Friday. We don't have much money. The medical bills took everything we had, but we want to give him a proper burial. If you could help with that, it would mean the world to us." "Consider it done," Travis said immediately. "And Mrs. Brannigan, I'd like to come to the funeral if that's okay with you. I want to say goodbye to Luke properly." The funeral arrangements became Travis's complete focus for the next several days. He worked with a local funeral home to ensure that Luke would have a service worthy of the remarkable child he had been. He arranged for flowers, for a beautiful casket, for everything the family needed during their darkest hour. But as Travis prepared for Luke's funeral, he began to understand that the family's problems extended far beyond the immediate costs of burial. Thaddeus Brannigan, Luke's father, had been forced to quit his job months earlier to help care for his son during treatments. Evangeline had exhausted her family leave and lost her position at the insurance company where she had worked for 8 years. The medical bills were staggering, over $400,000 in treatments that their insurance had only partially covered. The family had lost their house to foreclosure and was currently living in their car, moving between hotel rooms when they could afford them, and sleeping in hospital parking lots when they couldn't. Luke's funeral was everything Travis had hoped it would be, a celebration of a life that had been far too short but had touched everyone who knew him. The church was packed with Luke's classmates, his medical team, families from the oncology ward who had been touched by his courage, and dozens of people who had heard his story through social media. Travis spoke at the service, sharing what Luke's letter had meant to him and promising that Luke's legacy would live on through acts of kindness and courage. "Luke taught me that being a hero isn't about what you accomplish on a football field," Travis said. "It's about how you treat people when they need you most, how you bring hope to others when they're facing their darkest moment." After the funeral, Travis joined the Brannigan family at their small apartment, the first stable housing they had been able to afford in months. But as he sat with Thaddeus and Evangeline, listening to them talk about their crushing debt and uncertain future, Travis realized that Luke's final request was going to require much more than paying for a funeral. "Luke asked me to help other children," Travis told the grieving parent, "but I think he would want me to help his family first. You shouldn't have to worry about money while you're grieving your son." Despite Travis's generous offer to help with their financial situation, the Brannigan family struggled with accepting what felt like charity from someone they barely knew. Thaddeus, in particular, was resistant to accepting money from Travis, feeling that it somehow diminished his role as the family's provider during their darkest hour. "I appreciate everything you've already done," Thaddeus told Travis during a tense conversation in their small apartment. "The funeral was beautiful, and I know Luke would have been thrilled to know you were there. But we'll figure out the rest on our own. We always have." Travis could see the pride warring with desperation in the man's eyes. Thaddeus had been a construction foreman before Luke's illness, a man who had built his identity around providing for his family through hard work and determination. The months of unemployment and mounting medical debt had stripped away his sense of purpose and self-worth. "This isn't charity," Travis insisted. "Luke asked me to help people, and that starts with making sure his parents don't lose everything because they fought to save their son's life. No family should face financial ruin because they refused to give up on their child." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Evangeline opened it to find Magnolia Whitfield, the nurse who had cared for Luke during his final weeks at Children's Mercy Hospital. Magnolia had organized several fundraising events for families in the oncology ward, and she had come to present the Brennigans with the results of a community campaign she had started after hearing about their situation. "The response has been incredible," Magnolia told them, handing Evangeline an envelope containing donations from hospital staff, families from Luke's school, and complete strangers who had been moved by his story. "We raised enough to cover your rent and utilities for the next 2 months, plus a little extra for groceries and necessities." For the first time since Luke's death, Evangeline broke down completely, sobbing with a mixture of gratitude and overwhelming grief. The kindness of strangers, combined with Travis's presence in their living room, seemed to make Luke's absence even more profound. "Luke always said that good people would take care of each other," she said through her tears. "He had such faith in people's goodness, even when everything in our world was falling apart." The small victory of temporary financial stability gave the family a brief respite from their immediate fears. They were able to sleep in real beds instead of their car, to cook meals instead of relying on hospital cafeteria food, and to begin the slow process of grieving without the constant pressure of creditors calling. Travis visited them several times during those weeks, never staying long but always checking to make sure they had what they needed. He brought groceries, helped Thaddeus with job applications, and simply listened when Evangeline needed to talk about Luke's favorite memories. But the temporary relief provided by the community fundraising couldn't address the crushing weight of medical debt that continued to grow even after Luke's death. The hospital bills kept arriving, each one a reminder of their son's final battle and their family's financial destruction. The situation reached a crisis point when Thaddeus received a call from a debt collection agent demanding immediate payment of $50,000 in outstanding medical expenses. The aggressive tactics of the collection agent, who threatened legal action and wage garnishment, sent Thaddeus into a spiral of despair and rage. "I sold everything," he told Evangeline that night, his voice hollow with defeat. "Our house, our savings, my tools, everything we own. I gave up 18 months of my life to sit in hospital rooms and hold Luke's hand during treatments, and it still wasn't enough. I couldn't save our son, and I couldn't protect our family from this debt." The weight of failure, both as a father and as a provider, became too much for Thaddeus to bear. On a cold Tuesday evening in February, while Evangeline was at the grocery store, he swallowed an entire bottle of sleeping pills and lay down on Luke's bed, holding his son's favorite stuffed animal. Evangeline found him when she returned home, unconscious but still breathing. The paramedics arrived within minutes and rushed him to the same hospital where Luke had died just weeks earlier. As Evangeline sat in another waiting room, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds of medical crisis, she felt completely alone in the world. "He left a note," the emergency room doctor told her, after Thaddeus had been stabilized and admitted to the psychiatric ward. "He wrote that he couldn't live with the guilt of failing his family, that he thought you would be better off without him." Evangeline stared at the doctor, trying to process the idea that she might lose her husband just weeks after losing their son. "Is he going to be okay?" "Physically, yes. We got to him in time, but he's going to need intensive psychological support to deal with the depression and trauma he's experienced. The loss of a child, combined with severe financial stress, creates a perfect storm for this kind of crisis." That night, Evangeline sat alone in their small apartment, surrounded by Luke's belongings and Thaddeus's suicide note. She had lost her son to cancer, her husband to despair, and now faced the possibility of losing their home again, as medical bills from Thaddeus's hospitalization joined the growing pile of unpaid debt. Jebediah Cross, the elderly neighbor who lived in the apartment next door, could hear Evangeline's sobs through the thin wall. He had been watching the family's struggle with growing concern, wanting to help, but unsure how to approach their grief. At 3 in the morning, when Evangeline's crying seemed to peak in intensity, Jebediah knocked softly on her door. "Honey," he said when answered, "you don't need to go through this alone. I know you don't know me, but I've been where you are. I lost my boy in Vietnam 40 years ago, and the grief nearly killed me and my wife both." Evangeline looked at this kind stranger who was offering comfort in her darkest hour. "How do you survive it?" she asked. "How do you keep going when everything you love is gone?" "You find a reason to honor their memory," Jebediah said gently. "You find a way to make sure their life mattered, that their story helps someone else." Luke touched a lot of people in his short life. Maybe his story isn't finished yet. As Evangeline listened to her neighbor's words, she thought about Luke's letter to Travis, about his final wish that his hero would help other children facing similar battles. Maybe Luke's death didn't have to be the end of his impact on the world. Maybe it could be the beginning of something larger than their family's private grief. But first, she had to figure out how to save her husband's life and find a way forward through the seemingly impossible maze of debt and despair that threatened to destroy everything Luke had loved about their family. When Travis learned about Thaddeus's suicide attempt through a call from Magnolia Whitfield, he felt a crushing sense of responsibility that went far beyond anything he had experienced as a professional athlete. Luke's letter had asked him to be a hero, but Travis was beginning to understand that true heroism might require more than he had ever given in his life. He drove to the hospital immediately, arriving to find Evangeline sitting alone in the psychiatric ward waiting room, still wearing the same clothes she had been wearing when she found her husband unconscious. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and she looked like someone who had reached the absolute limit of human endurance. "I'm so sorry," Travis said, sitting down beside her. "How is he?" "The doctors say he'll live," Evangeline replied, her voice flat and emotional. "But he told them he doesn't want to live. He said the guilt of not being able to save Luke is eating him alive, and now he feels like he's destroying what's left of our family by adding more medical bills we can't pay." Travis felt anger building in his chest, not at Thaddeus, but at a system that could drive a grieving father to attempt suicide because he couldn't afford to save his child's life. "This is insane," he said. "No family should face financial ruin because they tried to save their child. No man should feel like a failure because cancer is expensive to fight." "That's not how Thaddeus sees it," Evangeline said. In his mind, a real man would have found a way to pay for Luke's treatment and still keep the family together. He thinks he failed as a father and as a husband. Travis stood up abruptly, pacing the small waiting room as he tried to process the magnitude of what the Brennigan family was facing. Luke's letter had asked him to help other children, but how could he focus on that larger mission when Luke's own parents were being destroyed by the aftermath of their son's death? "I want to see him," Travis said suddenly. "I want to talk to Thaddeus." "I don't think that's a good idea," Evangeline replied. "He's not in a good place mentally, and he's already feeling humiliated that a stranger has had to step in to help us." "I'm not a stranger," Travis said firmly. "Luke made me part of this family. He wrote that letter. And I think Thaddeus needs to understand that accepting help doesn't make him weak. It makes him smart." After some discussion with the psychiatric staff, Travis was allowed a brief visit with Thaddeus. He found Luke's father sedated but awake, staring at the ceiling with the hollow expression of someone who had given up completely. "You didn't have to come here," Thaddeus said, without looking at Travis. "I know Evangeline called you, but this isn't your problem to solve." "Actually, it is," Travis replied, pulling a chair close to the bed. "Luke made it my problem when he wrote me that letter. He asked me to be a hero, and heroes don't abandon people when things get difficult." Thaddeus finally turned to look at Travis, his eyes filled with pain and shame. "You don't understand. I had 18 months to save my son's life, and I failed. 18 months to figure out how to pay for his treatments without destroying our family, and I failed at that too. What kind of man lets his wife find him unconscious on their dead child's bed? The kind of man who loved his son so much that losing him felt like losing everything," Travis said quietly. "The kind of man who carried the weight of an impossible situation till it broke him. There's no shame in that, Thaddeus. The shame belongs to a system that puts families in these situations." Travis reached into his jacket and pulled out Luke's original letter, which he had been carrying with him since the day it arrived. Luke wrote something in here that I think you need to hear. He said that watching me play football made him remember that heroes are real. But you know what? You were his first hero, long before he ever knew who I was. I wasn't heroic, Thaddeus said bitterly. I was just a construction worker who couldn't afford to save his own kid. You were a father who gave up everything to fight for his son's life, Travis corrected. You quit your job to be with Luke during treatment. You sold your house, your tool, everything you owned to pay for medical. You held his hand through 18 months of chemotherapy and radiation and surgery. If that's not heroic, then I don't know what is. Travis could see Thaddeus struggling with these words, wanting to believe them, but unable to let go of the guilt that was consuming him. Luke wrote that letter because he believed in heroes, Travis continued. But the hero he believed in most was you. He learned courage by watching you fight for him every single day. He learned about love by seeing how much you were willing to sacrifice for his life. You didn't fail him, Thaddeus. You showed him what real strength looks like. For the first time since Travis had entered the room, Thaddeus began to cry. I miss him so much, he whispered. I keep thinking I hear him calling for me from his room. I keep expecting him to ask me to help him with his homework or to play catch in the backyard. That's because he's still with you, Travis said. Luke is in every act of kindness you showed him, in every moment of courage you displayed while fighting for his life. And he's in that letter, asking both of us to make sure other kids get the same love and support he got from his family. Travis spent the next hour sitting with Thaddeus, not trying to fix everything, but simply acknowledging the magnitude of his loss and the impossible burden he had been carrying. When visiting hours ended, Travis left with a better understanding of what Luke's letter was really asking him to do. It wasn't enough to simply help the Brannigan family financially, though that was certainly part of what needed to happen. Luke's real request was for Travis to understand the weight of being someone's hero, to recognize the responsibility that came with being the person others looked to for hope and inspiration. That evening, Travis sat in the hospital parking lot and called his financial advisor. I want to set up a foundation, he said, not just to pay for the Brannigans' expenses, but to help other families facing the same impossible choices. I want to make sure no other father has to choose between saving his child and saving his family's future. That's a big commitment, Travis, his advisor said. Are you sure you're ready for something like that? Travis looked back at the hospital where Thaddeus was fighting for his mental health and where Luke had fought for his life. A 10-year-old kid asked me to be a hero, he said. I think it's time I figured out what that really means. But even as Travis began making plans to honor Luke's memory through charitable work, he knew that the hardest part lay ahead. He had to find a way to help the Brannigan family heal from their trauma while building something larger that could help other families avoid the same devastating choices. Luke's letter had started as a child's simple wish to meet his hero. Now, it was becoming a call to action that would challenge everything Travis thought he knew of success, responsibility, and what it meant to make a difference in the world. Travis spent the next several weeks visiting Thaddeus in the psychiatric facility, while simultaneously working with lawyers and financial advisors to establish what would eventually become Luke's legacy foundation. But the more he learned about childhood cancer treatment and the financial devastation it caused families, the more overwhelmed he felt by the scope of the problem Luke had unknowingly asked him to address. The statistics were staggering. Families affected by childhood cancer faced an average of $40,000 in out-of-pocket medical expenses during the first year of treatment alone. Many parents were forced to quit their jobs to care for their children, leading to lost income that often exceeded the medical costs themselves. More than half of families with children fighting cancer ended up in significant debt, and many lost their home, their savings, and their future financial security. Luke's situation isn't unique, explained Dr. Sarah Martinez, a pediatric oncologist at Children's Mercy Hospital whom Travis had contacted for guidance. I see families destroyed by medical debt every single week, parents who remortgage their homes, empty their retirement accounts, and borrow money from anyone who will lend it, all to keep their children alive. And when treatment ends, whether the child survives or not, these families are left with financial devastation that can last for decades. Travis found himself questioning whether he was capable of taking on such an enormous challenge. I'm a football player, He confided to his mother during one of their regular phone conversations. I catch passes and score touchdowns. What do I know about healthcare policy, or charitable foundations, or helping families navigate medical crises? You know what it means to care about people, Donna Kelce replied. And sometimes that's more important than expertise. Luke didn't write to you because you were an expert on childhood cancer. He wrote to you because he believed you would care enough to try. But Travis's self-doubt deepened when he attended a support group meeting for parents of children with cancer, hoping to better understand the challenges these families faced. Listening to mothers and fathers share their stories of financial ruin, family stress, and desperate decision-making, Travis felt completely out of his depth. One father, whose 8-year-old daughter was undergoing treatment for leukemia, spoke about having to choose between paying for his child's medication and keeping the electricity turned on in their apartment. A mother described rationing her own diabetes medication so she could afford her son's cancer treatment. Another couple talked about sleeping in their car in the hospital parking lot because they couldn't afford both lodging and medical copay. I listened to all these stories, Travis told Evangeline during one of his visits to see Thaddeus, and I realized that Luke's letter is asking me to solve problems that are way bigger than anything I've ever faced. What if I start this foundation and it's not enough? What if I raise a bunch of money and it barely makes a dent in the problem? Evangeline was quiet for a moment before responding. Luke never asked you to solve the problem for everyone, he said. He asked you to help, the way you helped him by giving him something to look forward to during his treatment. Even if you can only help one family at a time, that's one family that doesn't have to go through what we went through. Despite Evangeline's reassurance, Travis continued to struggle with the weight of expectation he felt from Luke's letter. The media attention around Luke's story had intensified rather than diminished over time, with news outlets regularly checking on the Brannigan family's situation and speculating about what Travis would do in response to the viral letter. The pressure became almost unbearable when Travis received a call from Evangeline, informing him that Thaddeus had attempted suicide again while in the psychiatric facility. This time, he had tried to hang himself with bedsheets in his room, and was only saved by the intervention of a night shift nurse who happened to check on him during rounds. The doctors say he's developed severe PTSD from Luke's illness and death, Evangeline explained through tears. He has nightmares about not being able to afford Luke's treatment. He has panic attacks when medical bills arrive in the mail. He can't work because he breaks down crying whenever anyone mentions children, or illness, or family. Travis drove to the hospital immediately, feeling like he was failing Luke in the most fundamental way possible. Luke had asked him to help other children. Travis couldn't even help Luke's own father find a reason to continue living. He found Thaddeus in restraint, heavily sedated but conscious. "I can't do this anymore," Thaddeus whispered when he saw Travis. "Every day I wake up and remember that Luke is gone, that I couldn't save him, that our family is destroyed because I wasn't strong enough or smart enough or rich enough to be the father he needed." "Thaddeus, listen to me," Travis said, sitting as close to the bed as the restraints would allow. "Luke didn't need you to be rich. He needed you to love him, and you did that perfectly. He didn't need you to be stronger than cancer. Nobody is stronger than cancer. He needed you to fight for him, and you did that every single day for 18 months. It wasn't enough," Thaddeus replied. "Nothing I did was enough." Travis felt a surge of frustration, not at Thaddeus, but at his own inability to reach this broken man who's drowning in guilt and grief. "Luke wrote in his letter that I taught him heroes are real," Travis said. "But he learned about heroes from watching you. Every day you got up and went to that hospital. Every treatment you sat through. Every night you held his hand when he was scared. That's what heroes do." As Travis sat with Thaddeus, he began to understand that Luke's letter wasn't just asking him to help other children with cancer. It was asking him to help the families who loved those children, to recognize that childhood illness affects entire families, and that healing has to include everyone who has been damaged by the experience. "I'm going to keep coming here until you believe me," Travis told Thaddeus before leaving that day. "Luke believed in both of us, and I'm not giving up on his father." That evening, Travis called his lawyer and made a decision that would change the trajectory of his foundation plan. "I want to expand what we're doing," he said. "It's not enough to pay medical bills. These families need counseling, support groups, financial planning, job placement assistance. They need comprehensive help to rebuild their lives. That's going to require a lot more resources than we initially discussed, his lawyer warned. Then we'll raise more resources, Travis replied. Luke asked me to help other children, but I'm learning that helping children means helping their entire family. We're going to figure out how to do this right, even if it takes everything I have. But even as Travis made these ambitious plans, he couldn't shake the fear that he was taking on more than he could handle, that Luke's faith in him might have been misplaced. The weight of being someone's hero was turning out to be far heavier than he had ever imagined. The turning point came 6 months after Luke's death, when Travis made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of announcing a large charitable donation or launching a high-profile foundation with media fanfare, Travis quietly began spending his off-season visiting children's hospitals across the country, carrying Luke's letter with him and sharing the story of the remarkable boy who had changed his perspective on what it meant to be a hero. His first stop was the pediatric oncology ward at Children's Mercy Hospital, where Luke had spent his final month. Travis arrived early on a Tuesday morning, not as a celebrity making a publicity appearance, but as someone who wanted to understand the daily reality of childhood cancer treatment. He spent hours talking with nurses, doctors, social workers, and, most importantly, with the children who were fighting battles similar to the one Luke had faced. "I want to tell you about my friend Luke," Travis would say to each child he met, showing them Luke's photograph and reading excerpts from his letter. "Luke taught me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep going even when you are scared." The response from the children was immediate and profound. They connected with Luke's story in ways that surprised even the medical staff, who were accustomed to seeing how children with serious illnesses supported each other. Luke's letter became a source of inspiration for kids who were facing their own uncertain futures, proof that their courage mattered and that their lives had impact beyond their medical struggle. But it was Travis's conversations with the parents that truly opened his eyes to the scope of what Luke had asked him to do. In hospital family rooms and cafeteria corners, mothers and fathers shared stories that echoed the Brannigan family's experience. The financial devastation, the job losses, the impossible choices between medical care and basic necessities. Travis heard the same themes repeated in family after family. "My husband hasn't been home in 3 months, one mother told him. "He's working double shifts to try to pay for our daughter's treatments, and I haven't left the hospital because I'm afraid something will happen when I'm not here. We're destroying our marriage to save our child's life, and I don't know how to fix either problem." Travis began to understand that Luke's final request went far beyond simply helping sick children. Luke had experienced firsthand how his illness had affected his entire family, how his parents had sacrificed everything for his care, how the stress of his medical bills had nearly destroyed his father. Luke's letter was asking Travis to help not just children with cancer, but the families who loved them. Luke's Legacy Foundation officially launched not with a press conference or a gala fundraising event, but with Travis writing personal checks to pay off the medical debt of 5 families he had met during his hospital visit. He worked with social workers to identify families who were facing the same impossible financial pressure that had nearly cost Thaddeus his life. The foundation's approach was deliberately comprehensive. In addition to paying medical expenses, Travis funded counseling services for parents struggling with trauma and depression, provided temporary housing for families who had lost their homes, and created job placement programs for parents who had been forced to leave their careers to care for sick children. Most importantly, Travis ensured that Thaddeus Brannigan became central to the foundation's work. After months of intensive therapy and medication, Thaddeus was finally stable enough to leave the psychiatric facility, but he still struggled with purpose and self-worth. Travis offered him a position as the foundation's family liaison, someone who could talk to other fathers facing the same impossible situation Thaddeus experienced. "I need someone who understands what these families are going through," Travis explained to Thaddeus during one of their conversations. "Someone who can tell them that the guilt and the fear and the feeling of failure, all of that, is normal. Someone who can show them that it's possible to survive losing a child and still find reason to keep living." Thaddeus was initially reluctant to take on such an emotionally challenging role. "I'm barely keeping myself together," he told Travis. "How can I help other people when I'm still figuring out how to get through each day?" "Because you know what rock bottom looks like," Travis replied. and you know that it's possible to climb back up from there. These families need to see someone who has been where they are and found a way forward. The work was difficult and emotionally draining for everyone involved, but it was also profoundly meaningful. Thaddeus discovered that helping other grieving fathers gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since Luke's death. Evangeline began volunteering with support groups for mothers of children with cancer, finding that sharing her experience helped her process her own grief while providing comfort to women facing similar losses. The foundation grew quietly but steadily, operating without the publicity campaigns or celebrity fundraising that characterized many charitable organizations. Travis preferred to fund the work through his own resources and private donations from people who had been touched by Luke's story, keeping the focus on the families being helped rather than on his own charitable efforts. A year after Luke's death, the foundation had helped more than 200 families navigate the financial and emotional challenges of childhood cancer treatment. The success wasn't measured in media coverage or public recognition, but in suicide attempts prevented, homes saved from foreclosure, marriages preserved through crisis, and children who received uninterrupted medical care because their families didn't have to choose between treatment and survival. The most powerful validation of the Foundation's work came in the form of letters from children who had been inspired by Luke's story. Travis kept every single one in a special file, reading them whenever he questioned whether his efforts were making a real difference. One letter, from a 9-year-old girl named Emma, who was undergoing treatment for brain cancer, particularly touched his heart. Dear Mr. Kelce, my mom told me about your friend Luke and how brave he was. I'm scared about my treatment, but I try to be brave like Luke was. Thank you for helping my family, so my dad didn't have to sell our house. Luke sounds like he was the best kid ever, and I hope someday I can help other kids the way he helped me. 2 years after receiving Luke's original letter, Travis stood in the cemetery where Luke was buried, reading aloud from the dozens of letters that had been left at his gravestone by children and family whose lives had been touched by his story. The simple granite marker had become an unexpected pilgrimage site for families dealing with childhood illness, a place where people came to draw strength from Luke's example of courage in the face of impossible circumstances. Luke, you wrote that you hoped I would help other kids someday, Travis said to the gravestone. I think you'd be proud of what we've built in your memory. But more than that, I think you'd be amazed to know how many people have found courage by hearing your story. You didn't just ask me to be a hero, you showed me how to be one. As Travis walked back to his car, he reflected on how completely Luke's letter had changed his understanding of success, responsibility, and what it meant to make a meaningful impact in the world. The 10-year-old boy who had died believing Travis was his hero had actually been the hero all along, teaching everyone who heard his story that real courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about doing what's right, even when you're terrified. Luke's final wish had been for Travis to help other children facing similar battles. But Luke's real gift had been showing Travis and countless others that even in the darkest circumstances, even when facing impossible odds, it was always possible to choose hope over despair, love over fear, and service to others over self-interest. The letter that had started as a dying child's simple request to meet his hero had become a call to action that transformed not just Travis's life, but the lives of hundreds of families who found hope in Luke's legacy of courage, compassion, and unwavering faith in the goodness of people.